Hey guys, welcome back. I have Coach Henry Torano with me today, and this time we're going to talk about the season, the year, and the events that Henry's talking to his clients about and how he helps them choose which events to do and then prepare for them, because particularly with the CrossFit Games changing the time of the year that they're going to have it, it's going to throw a lot of wrenches into the systems because people is just going to be a little bit different rhythm. So I just want to kind of walk through understanding how he goes and talks about his clients with this. So Henry, first question, man. How is this season different in your mind? So besides just the Open, how is the season different for you and your clients?
Yeah, and I think there's two parts to that question. First, this particular season, because there's two Opens in 2019. And then, we could ask that question as to how it's going to be different moving forward. Right now, it's honestly kind of a shit show. You have people who went out to live events and went after it pretty hard in the last 2 to 3 months. You have all the athletes that went to the games, and they're pretty much gearing up to do it all over again here in 5 weeks already.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a bunch of other people who did the Open. Some barely survived it, or came out feeling a little bit run over, and now they're gonna try to do it again a couple months later. So like this particular year, I just think it's gonna be crazy. Then we'll get a little more clarity moving forward as to how the year really feels now that sanctionals are all in place. We're starting to see that there's not going to be as many qualifier seasons as we thought, as more competitions are using the same qualifiers as we saw via Wodapalooza, and as we're going to see via the Open. I think that's going to increase as the years go by, and it's going to be a little more organized.
So are you actually having that conversation with your clients and just kind of being open and honest and saying, well, it's going to be a little bit of a shit show and we're just going to deal with it? Is that basically the starting conversation?
Yeah, this conversation is different, obviously, depending on all the clients, because they're at different spots in every sense of the word. I have my guy that went to the games, and that conversation was, dude, we're still going to rest. You're going to do a full deload, and I'm going to bring you back slow, and then, we'll try to get you into the rhythm of things here in the next, 2 to 3 weeks prior to. But right now I'm putting my eggs in the basket of I want you rested rather than I'm trying to make a miracle here happen in 5 to 7 weeks after that deload. I just had this conversation today with one of my other clients. He wants to try and win his country, and he's a top 5 in his country. So he did the Open, went after it. Then he had another 2 local competitions that he already had scheduled and had made plans and arranged travel for. That was June and end of July. So that was Open, comp in June, comp in July, and now we're heading into the Open. And I just kind of, sent him a note and said, hey, is this really what we want to do this year? Because if so, I need to, mix training up a little bit, because I honestly have you doing what I think you should be doing in training, and that's not necessarily getting you into a peak.
Out of curiosity, if you've heard back from the client, what does he want to do? Does he want to go this year, or does he want to hold?
He wants to go this year. I understand the decision. The coach in me thinks otherwise. The ex-athlete in me would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
He's 34, 35, so he knows he's got limited shots at this moving forward, so he wants to give it a go. And again, I'll just do my best to, honestly, it's duct taping it a little bit or fast tracking him here for a couple of weeks to get a feel for that type of intensity and that faster pace. But I also do my best to create that awareness with him, like, hey, and he's also a coach, so. You've even told me when we did your testing and when we looked at numbers of what you needed to improve. Do you think that 2.5 months of training is enough to get that improvement? And he's like, no, I'm aware it's not, but this is really the goal, and I want to go for it. So.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense. So fast forward me. after this year's Open, what do those conversations start looking like? Are you going client by client and trying to understand sanctional by sanctional, competition by competition? Is there consistency across your entire client list? How do you go about that conversation once we suspect the season is laid out?
Yeah, so honestly, the one good thing that came out of this is that CrossFit did us the favor of avoiding a bunch of conversations with clients, because now there's no regionals. And that was 80 to 90% of my competitive clients. Like, no, I want to try and, make a push for regionals. So that's not there anymore. Now it's more a conversation of, where do you live? And do you have a shot of winning in your country? Obviously, the bulk of the U.S. clients aren't even thinking about that, as far as trying to beat Hefner and Fraser and Panchik and those guys. Or do you think you're even close to being top 10 in the world in the Open? And all of a sudden, the Open stops being so attractive. We even saw that in the April version of the Open with, 40, 50% less registration from the previous year, something like that. So definitely a lot less interest. A lot of people, I think, just gave up on competing, for one, after seeing that format. A lot of people got excited. I'm for one, I got excited because, what did you want to do? You wanted to go to regionals to compete against, a good bunch of athletes in a very organized setting, like under those lights. Well, now there's these, 16, I don't even know if there's 16 or 20 by this point.
Yeah.
Sanctionals that give you that opportunity. And you do need to qualify, and we can train for a particular weekend and not, try to sustain 5 consecutive weeks of, going hard at it, which was the scenario with the Open. I think it's a lot more organized, and it allows for us to, create better, more than one peak, and organize the training season or training program a lot better.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a ton of sense to me. What would you say your typical, and let's put them into the athlete spectrum, what does your typical athlete anticipate doing in terms of the number of competitions per year? So how many times are you gearing them up to go generally?
Yeah, that's also a great question. Do you mean in their brains or what I'm actually doing?
Let me ask you both. So how many times per year on the average do many of your clients compete just physically? And then in your training program, how many times do you peak them to compete in the training program?
Okay, so first, most of them want to compete every other weekend, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they bring it up as far as, but Hefner's doing all the qualifiers. Like, yeah, and then, that the whole year not Hefner conversation comes up. So that's for one. Obviously, a lot of hype within, the local scene as far as small gym competitions and they wanting to do that. And then, obviously, what they can actually handle. I think that my initial job is to first identify and put, priorities behind those. Give me your A priority, give me your B priority, give me your C, to how many letters they believe that they should be competing. Then we'll start talking about, well, this is where you're at, and this is how long it could possibly take you to get to where you want to be in the long run. And then we start having that conversation about how often do you think that you can actually handle adapting and getting that much better to be able to, have it come out on the competition floor. That's kind of a ambiguous answer, but I'll give you something more solid. I really do believe that nobody should try to actually peak more than once in a year. So after that entire conversation, we'll identify A, B, and C, and you're not going to peak for B and C.
Mm.
You may just be doing regular training and then taking somewhat of a light week and then go and see what happens. And of course, there's a lot of different athletes. there's athletes who are good enough to go there under that scenario and still be top 10. Others really don't have a great performance because what they're doing in training has nothing to do with what actually goes on in the competition.
So are you basically saying that you look at the whole, we'll just call it a year, you look at the whole year with an athlete and you identify the priority competition, and that's what training is leading to, whether it's 4 months away, 8 months away, whatever. And then anything subsequently to that is merely part of the longer term training plan, except they'll be a little bit more hyped up for the weekend that they're competing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
Pretty precise. I call them dress rehearsals.
Okay.
Those competitions that happen beforehand.
Got it. And how do you, I mean, when clients, if they want to compete every other week, how do you work them through to be less stressed about that or to be less anxious about that? Is that more of a long-term outcome conversation? Is that, how do you get them past that serious desire? Because we know in CrossFit, man, people want to compete all the time. I was that way. You were that way for a little bit. How do you start working somebody past that anxiousness?
So I kind of started with a very abrupt statement and describe that scenario and just flat out say, like, I'm not going to help you do that. Right? I'm not going to help you compete every month. So let's just start there. And then based off of that premise, these are the reasons why. I think, one of the most powerful ones is think about your favorite NFL player or a bunch of players. They're not, gearing up and hooking up amongst friends to go and beat the shit out of each other, other than during those 16 weeks of the year. And most of the times you look and they're not even practicing with gear during the week.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's that. And then, fill in the blank for any other sport. Somehow, in CrossFit, we're under the impression that actually makes you stronger. That leads me to my next point. Training is meant to build you up. Competition really breaks you down. And then we have some conversation around that. And then I illustrate how that looks and what I mean by that. And I usually just show them a program from a current client or, something that already happened a while back. Has to look at all the training that happened leading up to the competition. Look at what happens in the next, 4 to 8 weeks. And as far as recovering and deload from that to actually be able to get you to express a peak sometime in the future, we need to have that downtime. Now, that downtime is whatever it was, 4 to 8 weeks, where you're just recovering from the breakdown. You're not, we're not making you stronger. We're not working towards the goal per se.
Gotcha. So if you were to leave people listening to this with a thought process for this period of time leading into the 2019 October Open, and then right after the Open, as it relates to planning a year, what would you leave them with?
Oh, man. I think you really want to use this Open as a final, in case you hadn't done it already, as a final assessment of where you're at. And that will really give you a clearer indication as to what the competitive landscape looks, moving forward for you. If you're a top 30, conceivably top 50 in the world person, the Open may still be something that, you want to work hard towards. But if you really want to get to the games, then, maybe the Open is not the solution and you need to start putting all these other events in the calendar. And then if you just like to compete for the experience of competing, then I'd altogether say there's no need to do the Open. Let's look at live events, consider proximity, travel time, expense, wherever and whatever you're willing to do to get there. And then let's work backwards and start looking at time frame to see, what do we need to do to try to get you there, whatever division it may be. That's another beautiful thing about the sanctionals. You actually can go in an RX intermediate category and still have, the big event experience.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate that, Henry. Guys, if you think about this whole thing, everybody's season's going to look a little bit differently. Everybody's going to have different priority competitions, and be willing to be okay with that, I think, at the end of the day, and set your season up to be able to compete at your best level for what the priority competition is going to be. But Henry, thanks for coming on, man, and we'll see everybody next time.
Yep. Thank you, Jim.